Welcome to the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sulon Carrick and I'm passionate about inspiring, motivating, supporting and informing women over 50 to embrace this exciting time of life. Health and wellness in mind, body and spirit are the foundations for living well, but there is so much more to a life well lived. Each week, through conversations with my guests, I'll be presenting topics that will help us all to live well and enjoy life. So join me as we discover new ways to become women living well after 50. Are you ready to start living? What are you waiting for? Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sulon Carrick and I'm delighted to have you join me. Congratulations, you've been given about 20 more years to live than your grandparents. How are you going to make the most of them? That's from the back cover of a new book called Aging Upwards by Berit Lewis. Berit shows that the story we so often tell ourselves about aging, that it's all downhill from 50, is simply wrong. In fact, research reveals we are at our happiest aged 80. Combining her extensive experience in teaching mindfulness with her knowledge of how to live and age well, Berit reveals a simple framework that can help you make the most out of those extra years of living. She's a sought-after speaker and owner of Thriving Life, offering workshops, courses and retreats in mental well-being. As well as being an experienced and accredited mindfulness teacher, she has a BA honours degree in psychology, a Master of Science in Vitality and Aging, and a Master in Communication. So, do you want to know how to live 20 more years and thrive? Then let's go to the conversation and find out. Welcome, Berit. It is lovely to have you join me, and you're way over on the other side of the world as we speak. So it's morning where you are and afternoon where I am. So great that you could join me.
Thank you so much for having me, Sue. It's great to be here.
Yes, now I was fortunate because you reached out about a book that you've just had published called Aging Upwards, and I was very fortunate that you sent me a copy, and I'm reading it through at the moment, nodding my head and sort of also coming up with things saying, oh, I didn't realize that or whatever. So it's really great and I'm enjoying it. But before we talk about that and the subject that we're talking about today about thriving and aging, is I'd like you just to give my listeners a little bit of background about yourself and how you eventually came to write the book.
Yeah, so it's a personal journey, I would say, because it started off really with me being living in Denmark with two young children. This is about 14 years ago, and at that time I was a communication consultant. And then my husband was offered a job here in the Netherlands. And we thought, oh, let's just go for it because our children are young and, two stressed careers. We never saw each other. And we went here, and at the beginning it was the honeymoon phase, but then we all of a sudden realized, or I realized, that I was no longer a title. I was no longer a communication consultant. And I realized how much I identified with my work. And it was a little bit of an identity crisis. And when people ask me, so what do you do? I was like, wow, I'm just a mother. I'm just a housewife. And that was somehow not enough for me. And so I went back and I started to study psychology at the Open University in the UK. And at the same time, I was also interested in yoga, and I always had an interest in meditation, which I never really knew what was. So I went on a silent retreat for 5 days to learn what meditation and what mindfulness was. And I realized that all these things that I had been taught or was being taught during my psychology degree was making sense on a completely different level, because the psychology was all sort of my intellectual level, your thoughts, you can change things, you can rephrase and change your mind and all of that. And it made sense. But then when I actually sat down and I could see my thoughts coming and going, and I could see my emotions from a distance, and I could step back and observe them and not get caught up in them, And that was a complete eye-opener for me. And I thought, this is such a super power that I can take with me, and I can teach other people as well. And so then I decided to become a mindfulness teacher. And then I started to do that. And I taught for some years to especially corporate environments, people with burnouts and stress or just very busy lives. And then COVID happened and all my jobs were canceled. And I thought, wow, what do I do now? And I have always had this desire to write a book at some point. And I thought, this is my opportunity. And because I'm from a international family, like my husband is Welsh, my children go to an American school, I'm Danish, and we live in the Netherlands. It's a bit of a mix of everything. We always talk about what's a good life, where's a good place to live. And so I thought, I will write a book about that. Where are we going to live when our children leave the nest? Where are we going to move to? And that kind of got me into the aging bit. And I was just turning 50 myself. So it was like a next phase of life. And I wanted to interview people who was older than me and about what they thought was a good life. And also people who had an academic background in aging and could tell me about it. And then it turned out that there's just around the corner here, there's a university called Leiden University, and they have a master in vitality and aging. So I jumped at it and went back to university again and did that during COVID. And as part of my master thesis, I created and I taught online, and then I also researched mindfulness-based vitality and aging. So how can mindfulness help us grow older? Because one of the things I found during the master was that so much that's researched about aging and written about aging, both academically, but also the popular book, is about avoiding aging. It's about how do we stay young for as long as possible. And there was not much about how do we cope with these challenges that's natural and unavoidable. And that's where I saw mindfulness could really help, because that's what helped me when I was, doing the retreat and other things, difficulties. How can I cope with them? How can I readjust my way of thinking about them so I don't get caught up in them? And that's what I saw in my research too, that it was all women who signed up for my course, that they got this distance and this mental flexibility so that they could say, right, so I can't do this anymore, or what can I do instead of sitting back and saying, oh my God, life is over, I'm old, what am I going to do now? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that was a great use of, first of all, I think many women could identify with you when you moved and you settled in and the honeymoon period was over. And whilst you would probably enjoy, being a wife and mother, as we all do,
yes.
There is more to life than that. And especially someone like yourself, you actually went and did something about it, which is great. And of course, another thing I think is that there were many positives that came out of COVID, if we think about it, because it gave someone like yourself time to write a book and to do extra study. And so, in a way, we can look at COVID and some positive outcomes there rather than looking at the negative all the time, which I've got a couple of things from your book here that we're going to talk about. But what I wanted to do was, now you mentioned something there which brought to mind a little story that you have in the book, or an anecdote, and it's about the giving life to a new kitchen knife. And I wondered if you could just share that with us, because I thought that was a really great, because when I read it, I thought, well, what's this, And then as I was reading what you meant, I thought, well, that's a great analogy, really. So I wondered if you could share that with us.
Yes. So it's the way that we look at the world is we tend to look at it in a mechanistic way. So we, if the car breaks down, we go out and we try to find out what's wrong with the car and we fix it, and then off we go again. And we tend to think of human beings in that way as well. There's something wrong with my shoulder. I go to the doctor and I expect him or her to change it, and off I go again. But when we get older, we're not machines, and things are sort of getting a bit worn out. So we can't just go and fix things. But that doesn't mean that we're broken. but we can shift our mind. So what I am using the knife for is like, if you have this kitchen knife that you've been using to cut vegetables for your whole life, and it's getting a bit worn out, and all of a sudden it's just too blunt to be able to cut through anything. But that doesn't mean that its purpose is over. But we can change the way that we approach it and see, okay, what else can I use this knife for? So maybe you can use it as to not crack nuts, for instance, or as a prop in a theater show. Or it's really about how we creatively look at things and say, what else can I do? And it's the same thing with us. So when we can't do our job anymore, we don't want to do it out anymore, or we can shift our attention and say, what else is important to me? What else is out there for me to explore? And it doesn't have to be something huge and grand like cure cancer or something like that. It can be little things, just like, okay, can I bring some kind of happiness to my local community, or special groups, or just my grandchildren, or can I do something else that gives me pleasure? So I think it's that creative shift of mind and saying, okay, what else is out there?
Yes, and repurposing ourselves, as you say, because for whatever reason, if we can't do something, it doesn't mean that that's the end. We just look for something else that we can do. So, you talk about the purpose that we need to have in life. And I think that's a creative way of looking at it, because a lot of us go, well, this is what I've done all, for many, many years. Now I can't do it. And probably we start to feel a bit of a failure if we can't continue to do things. And for example, I enjoy running, and I do long distance running, and I'm in my 60s. And while I still can do it, I will, because I love it. I run with friends, and we talk and we chat and we go in fun runs. Now, if I couldn't do that, I would certainly struggle at first, because I enjoy doing it so much and I like being active, and that's what I like to do. But I think what you're saying is that, okay, so you can't do running anymore, but perhaps there's other activities, if you're an active type of person, that you can do, that you will still feel as if you're being active with your body, even if you're not doing the running.
That's right. I think it's about connecting back to what it gives you in the first place. And I think it's very interlinked with our identity. So when you're explaining that you like to run, I think because you see yourself as a runner, right? So that's why it's so hard to let go of, because we have to switch things around and say, so who else am I? And we so easily get caught up in this old narrative about who we are and how we want the world to see us and how we want to interact with the world. So yeah, it's a hard thing to do for sure, but it's possible if we are open to it. And it comes, which I also write a lot about in my book, is that self-compassion. It's to be able to face it and say, okay, yeah, this is pretty bad. I can't do this anymore, and it gave me so much pleasure, but it doesn't mean that I can't do other things as well, and meet that with self-compassion, instead of hitting yourself over the head and saying, oh, I'm so stupid, or I'm so useless, or I'm worthless, or whatever it is we've come up with.
Or I'm getting too old, or something like that. And I don't like to you say that. But now I think that you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but do you mention about not saying something like age is just a number?
Yes. Yeah. I actually don't like that saying, because age is part of who I am. It's part of my identity. It's part of many things that I am. So I think we should embrace it as part of who we are, and not just say that, because it's a reality. And I think it's interlinked with that narrative in our world that we have, that aging is bad, young is good. And we need to get over that and see aging is just living. So it's a continuous thing, and it's not a before and after, and it's not all downhill from when we're in the middle of it. It's a different thing. No,
I like that too, the way you say that, it's not downhill downhill from 50, because a lot of people, perhaps not so much now at 50, because I think, I look at women who are 50, so they're 16 years younger, nearly 20 years younger than me now. Oh, that's a long time. They sort of are embracing that, they think differently to perhaps what I did when I was 50, or the previous generations, our mothers and so forth. And we are living longer as well. So just, I think that it's just about embracing the life, as you say, and putting a positive spin. And in your book, you talk about chronological and biological aging. And I wondered if we could just have a little chat about that for a moment. You could explain that. And because I found
the chronological, you can't change anything about. That's the amount of years since you were born. And the biological aging is the different ways that you can, how your blood is and stuff. You can measure biological factors that tells you how old you are. And that can be changed through our lifestyle and what we eat and exercise and all of those things. And that we can affect. And
it was just about the chronological. We can't do much about the biological aging we can. And that is all to do with how we our lifestyle. So it is the exercising, the eating nutritious foods, but also I think it's the mental attitude that we have as well to life.
For sure. Yes Just the way we think of aging affects how we feel.
That's exactly right. And I think in one part of the book we were talking, you discuss about research, I think, where people in their 80s were interviewed about do they have a good life, and the answers that they came up with may not be what we would normally expect.
That's right, because we think that if we have disabilities, if we're not able to have these amazing bodies that can do everything, that our life satisfaction will go down. But it doesn't. Quite the opposite. A lot of older people have a better level of satisfaction in their lives than younger. If you actually look at our level of, when we say we are the happiest, if you ask a person when they're 80 or 20, or they will actually come and say they're the happiest when they're 80, which is quite a surprise. Most people don't think that that's the case, but it is.
Yeah, and that again comes down to attitude, but also, I suppose, acceptance of life. And you've experienced life, you've experienced different things in life, and I do think you do become a bit wiser, a bit more accepting, but not in a way where you're giving up, but you do learn to be more accepting of things, and so you're a bit more at peace with yourself and who you are and as a person.
And I think you also start to, or you realize what's important in life, and you don't get caught up in all the little things that we so easily spend life thinking about, worrying about when we're younger. We sort of know, okay, this is not really important in the bigger pictures. And so you don't so easily get caught up in the negativity.
No, that's right. And I think your book is actually something that everybody could read, because it, no matter the age, because for a start, we all age, we can't avoid that. But I think the way younger people can, perhaps look at older people, or, ageism is still there. And perhaps they need to realise that the ageing population still have a lot to give to society. Sure. And so I think that's important.
And also, I think also we have to get over these stereotypes. All these, my children so often go and tell me things about, the boomer generation or whatever they call them. And I'm like, but I'm not the same as this. Just because I'm born in the same period doesn't mean that I'm the same as this whole group of people. That's one thing. Maybe I have something in common, like I'm a woman, I'm living in Europe or whatever it is. All of these things is part of who I am, but it doesn't mean that I'm only that. And I'm not only that generation. And I think as a young person, they also have to stop identifying with these things, because if you identify it, that's what you become. And that's going to limit your opportunities and the way that you look at the world and think, what can I do here? But it's natural. It's the way we are. The world is a confusing place, and our brains need to make shortcuts. And so we stereotype. But I think the mindfulness can let us step back and then realize, I'm judging myself based on these stories, or I'm judging my friends or the people around me based on these stories. They might not be true. So maybe I can approach the people around me in a much more open awareness and see, okay, what else can that person do apart from being 50 or whatever it is. Yeah.
And I think that's the key to being open, having that open awareness and being open in whatever age you are, to new things, and to and as we age, I think that's the key too, being open to trying new things and not saying, well, this is the way I've always done it, so that's the way I'm always going to do it. If there's different ways, open to technology, open to lots of things, because the world is a pretty creative place, and there's lots of exciting things we can do if we just have an open mind.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's that generational diversion is creating much more tension, and especially in workplaces, we just put labels on each other, and it's not really helping us.
No, we had a program on one of the television stations out here, and they had a group of elderly people who were in their 80s, 90s in a nursing home, and they brought in preschool children. They might have done it in the Netherlands as well. I think that's where they got the idea from. And for 6 weeks, and every day the little ones would come in and they'd be matched up with an older person. And it was wonderful to see that the older people started to change in a positive way, but they also had an effect on the younger ones as well. And then they tried it with teenagers, and it was very heartwarming, because at the end, it was I got a little bit teary, because it was just so beautiful that because they'd had these times and were taken through different activities together, and it might just be a little walking obstacle course or something, and the little one would be the older person would be a bit scared, and they'd say, I don't think I can do it, and the little one would say, yes you can, I'm with you, come on. And they would start doing that, and it was just so wonderful the way that they influenced each other in a positive way.
Yeah, we need so much more of that. And they've actually here in the Netherlands, I think that's wonderful, because they're lacking student accommodation, so they've actually opened up some of the retirement homes and said that students can now live there for free.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
And that's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Well, I think so too, because it will give them an appreciation of older people. And even though they might be in the aged care homes, doesn't mean that they've stopped. It just means that they need a little bit of extra care, but it doesn't mean that mentally, and in most cases physically, they haven't stopped living. So let's talk about mindfulness, because you are a bit of an expert on that and you are a coach. So why is it so important for us to learn how to be mindful? And I just want to say that word mindfulness sort of gets thrown around a bit and has lost a little bit of its impact, but let's bring it back and put a bit more emphasis on it, because it is so important.
Yeah, for sure. So I think what has happened to mindfulness is that it becomes associated for many people with something that is about relaxation. And I can understand why it has come to that, because often it's the quick fix, and it helps us calm down whenever we go and we just focus on our breath, and that calms down our nervous system. That's good for us. But if you really want to learn or have the benefits and practice in mindfulness, you've got to get beyond the relaxation into the awareness. So the thing is, in order for you to become aware, you have to first be able to control your attention. And in the world we live in today, it's really hard because we're actually training our attention to be distracted all the time. We're teaching ourselves to think that every interruption that happens in life is important. And so we constantly let ourselves be distracted. But we got to turn that around and teach ourselves to be able to sit for a while and focus on one thing. So that can be the breath, but it can also be just some other physical sensation like feet on the floor. And then we'll sit there for a while and the mind will go off, because that's what our minds do. It will always go and scan the environment for something that might put us into danger, or think about things could be better. And that's natural. That's what we do. And it's hard in the beginning. And then we bring it back and off it goes, and then we bring it back. But what happens then if we get better, if we train it, and it's like, now I don't have a glass here, but imagine I had a glass with water in, and I often use this analogy if I go out into the canals here in the Netherlands and take the water from there, it will be a little murky and you can't see through it. And if I leave it on my table to sit for a while, the settlement will go to the bottom and the water will become a little bit clearer. And then the moment I shake it again, it will go up and then it will go clearer. And it's the same thing that happens in our minds. We're able to sit, we can let all of these craziness that goes on in all our thoughts, let them settle for a bit, and you can start to see things a little bit clearer. And the things you start to see is how we are wired genetically. So how we're wired to constantly keep safe, but that our survival is not necessarily the same as mentally thriving. Often it's the opposite. And it urges us to do certain things. That's just the way we're wired. But we can step back and become aware of that. And then we can ask, is this actually helping me live the life I want to live? Is this actually helping me be the person I want to be? And you can also start to see this world that you've constructed in your mind, all your beliefs, all your patterns of behavior. You can start to see them. And again, you can step back and say, okay, I might have told myself throughout my life that I'm not good enough, but is that thought helping me now? And maybe not. So then you can start to, because that's the beautiful thing. Neurologically, we can keep rewiring our brain. So yes, it's a little bit harder than when we were younger, but we still can. And it's still possible to change the way we see things, to change the way we behave instantaneously. We can step back, and whenever that urge to go and do something that's not beneficial for us, we can step back and say, no, hang on, I'm choosing to maybe do something else this time. And that can become a new habit. So that's what mindfulness, I think, can give us, no matter what time of our life we're in, if we're old or young. It's just different things we're dealing with when we're older.
I do think they're trying to bring that into schools now, though, and which I think is a great idea, because the younger ones are going to learn it a lot earlier than what we did. Now,
because the earlier you learn it, the more beneficial you'll have it throughout your life, and the more experienced you are when you are older. So start as young as you can.
That's right. And meditation, if they will just sit there for a little while. And I've noticed my grandsons will do that, and one said to me once, oh, I've just got to go and meditate for a while, which I thought was quite funny, but because he was only little. But he understood that, hey, I just need to step back. So I think that's great. So I think it was chapter 9 where you talk about the power of non-doing and secret of stopping, because it's probably a little bit what you've covered there, but we're just so caught up in, oh, I'm not doing anything, but I should be, I suppose, instead of accepting that non-doing feeling.
Yeah, and that's why it's so hard for us to meditate, because we're really going against this instinctual that we always need to do something, right? And that's culturally enhanced, because we can constantly told we got to be somebody to be loved. We got to earn love. We got to achieve. We got to have our status, and we got to earn enough money and live in the right house, and all of these things we got to do. And we forget to sometimes be human beings. We become human doings, right? But sometimes the best approach is just to be. And that's hard to just sit and do nothing, but it's so beneficial for us.
That was my word of the year last year, be. And I always tried to incorporate some of that into my life, just be, just relax. And I have got into a little bit of a better habit because I'm someone that's driven and I like to be doing things all the time, starting a podcast in my 60s, doing all these things as I'm getting older, because that's me. I like that. But I'm also starting to value that time where you just stop and clear your mind and just sort of push everything aside for the time being. It's so
about
good
balance,
for our health.
right? You've got to find the balance. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So we are coming up, we're going well with our chats at the moment, and we're coming towards the end, but a couple of points I did want to talk about, another area, and I don't want to give too much away out of the book, but there was some really good points that I wanted to raise, and hopefully that's going to pique the interest of the listeners. But it's taming the wandering negative mind by savoring the pleasant.
Yeah, and that's really what we were talking about. It's we have this caveman brain, and it will constantly look for dangers, and because of that we have a negativity bias, and that's what we do. We will always look for the negative in things because that's what we learn from, and that's what keeps us safe, but it's not necessarily what is helping our well-being mentally. So we don't notice things that does not possess a danger to us. So like, just literally stop and smell the roses, feel the sunshine. Whenever somebody hugs us or gives us a compliment, just let that linger for a little bit so that we actually take it inside and it becomes part of our long-term memory. Because if we just go through life and say that, oh yeah, that's nice, but hang on, I have to do this now, we don't actually feel it, and it doesn't become part of the way we look at the world. And if we take the time to really let it come in and feel it physically as well, we start to see that the world is so much more than just the negative things. And so whenever something does feel difficult, and this is also what I found with the mindfulness, is so when we have pain, when we have chronic illness or something like that, we are able to broaden our mind and say, yes, that pain is here and it's real and it's really unbearable, but what else is here right now? And we can broaden our awareness out and let the other things be there at the same time. And that way it's not as intense. The negative things is sort of being diluted into something that's bigger. And that's what I think mindfulness can give us.
I think that's a great point. But I also like the way you've written savoring the pleasant, because when you said about when you're being given a hug or you're giving a hug, savoring that moment rather than just a quick one and off we go. And I think the other thing is that, especially I do believe we have a duty to be role models to, our children and grandchildren and those coming after us. And if we don't stop and appreciate that hug that they're giving us, or let's go and have a look at sit in the sunshine and enjoy the beautiful warmth of the sun and do that. If they don't see us doing that, they're going to lose that ability as well. I mean, when they're little kids, they do appreciate, they're in the moment all the time. They appreciate everything. They're looking at the little ants, they're looking around them. And it's as we get older that we get too caught up in life. So I also think that it's, a responsibility for us to help them savor the pleasant as well.
For sure. And that goes back to what we talked about before, the intercultural interaction and how important that is. And as you were just saying, how I think my children were my best mindfulness teachers, because they were, as you say, really curious about the world and stepping out of my autopilot and said, that is actually quite interesting how that ant looks like. And
Yes. Well, I found that with my grandsons because I was working, I was a full-time, I worked full-time, I had the children, but I still worked and I sort of missed out a lot with that. So when I had grandchildren and grandsons in particular, I said, right, I'm not missing out here. And we would have wonderful adventures. Once a week, I would mind them before now they've started school. But it was just wonderful because I would stop and do whatever he or they wanted to do. And it was just wonderful rediscovering the world and all these little things that you just don't appreciate that are just a wonder to them. And then it becomes wonderful to you as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I really, now they're at school and life goes on, but I'm still learning from them, so that's good. Now, I do have we're coming to the end of the show, and I am going to put all your links to your website, your books. Now, with your work, do you do that online as well as in person? Yes, so
I do,
that's really,
yes.
I think
that's one of the, as you were talking about before, the COVID, when I started teaching mindfulness, I was really worried that I wouldn't have that same connection as you have in a room with people. But I found a lot of them came back to me and said, I actually like to sit in the comfort of my own home and then have that, because it's vulnerable things that you talk about, and just knowing that you're at home. And if emotions come over you that's too strong and you don't want to have people see you cry or whatever it is that come, you can just turn off your camera. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
It's that comfort, and people actually like that. And the one-to-one discussions that you also have online can be quite intense and quite personal, even though it's a person that's sitting on the other side of the world. And I think that's actually wonderful. Yeah.
Well, I do too. And that's why I love the podcast, because when I'm talking to my guests, and you're in the Netherlands, I'm in Australia, and it's just like we're having a conversation. You forget about the screen being there. And I really think it's great. But also I think for people, you can relax more in your own environment. So I think that is really helpful. So that's great. So I will be putting the links to your website and any way that people can contact you, because and also to where they can buy the book, which I really encourage everyone to do.
Thank
you.
Before
we go, Berit, I just have one question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, what does being a woman living well after 50 mean to you?
Being curious.
I love that.
Yeah. Continue to be open to the world and what it's got to give you and what you got to give to that.
Yeah, that's great. And I've got well over 100 podcast episodes, and I've never had the same answer from anyone. So that's great. It's wonderful great. Because every time they say something, I think, oh yes, that is, because living well covers everything. It's not just health, it's everything. So being curious is good. And I mean, it is also, they've had studies where, curiosity, the willingness to keep learning, to be a lifelong learner, is so good for our mental health as well as our creativity as well. So it's just got so many benefits to it. So so thank you so much for being my guest today, Berit. It has been a pleasure to chat to you, and I've really enjoyed the book. As I said, I'm about halfway through, so I'll continue to finish that. But you've got some really good points in there, and also a different way to looking at things to what we normally have with aging, and also mindfulness as well. So it's really an excellent book. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
Time well spent during COVID.
Thank you.
And look, just before you go, you said it right at the beginning, you and your husband were saying, where are we going to live when we retire? Would you like to share that with us?
I wish I could. I don't actually
you haven't got that far yet.
No, we don't know.
But isn't that wonderful? I mean, in previous generations, grandparents and whatever, they would have stayed in the one place forever where they grew up. That was where they died, never got out anywhere. And now we just have, the world is such a small place, and we have so many opportunities with technology. You could, even if you wanted to keep working, you could still do it anywhere in the world with most jobs. So that's the exciting part.
We'll do that. Maybe Australia. Yes. I lived in Australia for 10 years actually.
Did you?
There, yes.
Yes.
So I wouldn't mind coming back.
No, well, you'd be welcome, I'm sure. So
thank you.
So thank you again, and it's been a pleasure to chat to you.
Same here. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was an interesting conversation with Berit Lewis on aging upwards, mindfulness, and the importance of mindfulness and embracing our aging rather than fighting against it, because it can all be such a positive experience. So I hope you've enjoyed the episode. I'd encourage you to check out Berit's book, Aging Upwards, a mindfulness-based approach to the longevity revolution. And if you have enjoyed the episode, I'd love you to leave me a like or a comment, and also share it with a friend who I'm sure would benefit from the conversation. Well, that's it for another episode. Hope you've enjoyed it. So until next time, remember to live well, enjoy life, and most of all, be a woman living life your way. Bye for now.